Hello and welcome to this video that will be covering some different aspects of the word processor. In this video we will take a look at the different kind of page breaks, the different kinds of styles that can be implemented, and also table of contents including the page numbering of a document. While working with a Word document, it is often a good practice to turn on the paragraph mark. It will allow you to see what's going on within the document. So for instance, now we have 2 empty paragraphs, and if I hit return one more time, we will have 3 empty paragraphs. Now empty paragraphs is typically something you want to avoid, so we will just start with our first paragraph here. Now in order to make this more visually interesting, we will import some text from the help section. Now this is some text that just imported from the help section, so we have some text to work with now. So for instance, we have this text. Perhaps we want to have an empty first page where we can input some additional information. Perhaps you're working on an assignment and you have some instruction on what you need to put on your first page. So let's do that by introducing a page break. And the page breaks you can find on the layout tab. So we go to the layout tab and we find the breaks, and we have some different options, but in this case now we can just introduce a ordinary page break. And by doing so we can also remove the empty paragraph that shows up on the second page. Now since we have the paragraph marked turned on, we can now also see that there is a page break here, and if we want to add information here, we just put the cursor before the page break and hit return, and then we get a paragraph to write on this page. So we can add like that. And now we can go back to our actual document. Now let's say this is our first page of the document and we actually want to start it with a heading. So we can go back to the home tab. We can put our cursor here and just introduce a new paragraph. And this is then we have some styles here, and they are useful because in this section here with the styles you can make all the necessary changes to your text so that no manual input should be required from the actual text, but everything is controlled by the different kinds of styles. So now if we go to this paragraph, we can see that the normal style is applied, and we go to this paragraph, it's the same, and this one, and so on. And we go to this one that we introduced now. This is also normal, but in this case we want it to be a heading, and we already have headings available here for us, so we can choose heading 1, which would be then chapter 1. We can call this introduction, for instance. Now perhaps you don't want to have it in the same style as the one that the word processor suggests to you when you open a new document, and that's okay. You can just change it by right-clicking on the style that you want to change and modify it, and then you can change it to whatever you like it to be. Perhaps you want it black and you want a bold font, and that's okay. And in addition to this, where you can make these changes here, we also have the options to make additional changes here. So for instance, we can go to the paragraph, we can make some changes. So perhaps you don't want to have the multiply line spacing, you can just put it as single, and this is the distance before and after. And we also have the preview, so we have a large distance before the previous paragraph or a smaller distance, same as you can put in some distance after here. And then we can save it, and that would make some permanent changes. So the next time we introduce the next section, the next chapter, we call it chapter 2 perhaps, you can see that this has the same formatting. And we could also introduce some text. Now this is formatted as normal, but as long as we have the cursor here at the paragraph, we can just change it into heading 3 and it will change correspondingly. So, similarly we could add a subsection, and that would be heading 2. And as we click on heading 2 here, we can see that heading 3 will appear, and should we introduce heading 3, the next heading, the next level of heading would also continue to appear. But perhaps the recommendation would be to have heading 1 and 2 mostly, primarily, and then perhaps use heading 3 sometimes, but not to use any further subsections below there. Should not be necessary, really. We can now also change this, perhaps, to correspond to what we already did with the previous one. So we can go in on the format and check the paragraph, have it as single line. Perhaps we want to have a little more spacing before, like that, and that would be the subsection. Now, well, if we have a lot of subsections and chapters, it could be interesting to have them numbered. So sometimes you could, like, for instance, you could write numbering 1 point introduction, but that's quite inconvenient, especially if you have a large document. So instead of doing that, we will go into the paragraph section here under the Home tab, and we will go into this one called the multi-level list. And in this selection here we have an option for numbering of headings, which is formatted already, so we just press this one. And now you should see here within the styles that the heading should actually be numbered, and also that your current headings that exist in your document always also become numbered. So this is also good practice to use styles in this way. Now it's good to have access here to your different styles, but sometimes you don't use them all. If you want to see, and actually sometimes there are styles that is not available here in this list, but that actually do exist in the document. And to see all your styles, you need to open this window here by pressing this small arrow here in the bottom right corner. And by doing that, we can see all the styles that are present in the document. And so, for instance, in this quick access, we may never use this one, so we can actually we cannot remove it. We have to close this one, and then we can remove from the style gallery. So if there are different styles that are not being used, they can be removed just to be you will be able to see the styles that you use more frequently, and you can click them more easily without having to open this prompt here. So that's one option. But when we remove them here, they are just removed from this style gallery. They will still be present in this list if we open this list here. And should you be lacking a style, let's say you want to have a specific style for a table or something, then it's a possibility to add a new style, and then you can name it yourself and you can make the settings that you want to have. So another good thing here to turn on is under the View tab. We turn on the View tab, and then we have the navigation pane. It's also useful for to observe the structure. So basically we have a mini table of content here that we can have a look at. And from this also we have the option to, let's say that we introduce another subsection 2. What we can then do is that we can drag and drop here, and then these whole sections, they will switch place, including all the text that is connected to that subsection, which can also come in handy if you want to move around things in your text without actually marking, copying and cutting and pasting. It's easier to just drag and drop here in the navigation pane. So that is some information about the styles, and also that the text should never be changed within the actual document. Sometimes it happens that you have text with different font sizes and different fonts within a document, and then it has not been formatted to the normal format. So now these paragraphs here, the normal ones, we can also go in and change if we want. We can modify them. Perhaps we want to have it a larger size, and perhaps we want to, have single line and a slightly smaller distance between them or something. We can do that, okay? And as you see now, all of them changed coherently, which is very useful for a large document. Now, as we have a document that is growing, we might be interested in introducing a table of contents to this document, and the table of content is normally located prior to the actual text, the first chapter. So in this case, perhaps we want to preserve our first page here, so we can add another page break, like so. So now we have a first page for whatever information that is requested, and we also have a second page here. So if we put the cursor to the left of the page break and hit return, we will get a new paragraph here. And then we can insert the table of content, and the table of content is residing within the reference tab. To the left here you can find the table of contents. So we open it up, and it will give us some automatic options. So we can just choose the first one. We have other options as well to download from office.com or customize. That's not interesting right now. Just take the automatic table, and we can introduce it. You see we have an empty paragraph here. We can remove it, but this paragraph here is included within the formats of the table of contents. And perhaps you want to match this style with the style of the heading section. So if we go back to the Home tab, we can now realize that we have a new style that has appeared in our quick gallery, the TOC heading, and you can also see that we put the cursor around here. We see that this is the one that is formatted. So we can right click it, we modify it, change it to match the previous one. By such we can have a coherency within the document. And perhaps you need to double check what's the distances and so on, but it's possible to do. So now we also have a table of content, and if we mark it, we can see that it's kind of dark gray, and that's typically an indication that this is something that is automatically formatted. So this is something that we can update based on what we're doing. Similarly, these headings here will only appear as long as you actually use the heading functions within the Word. So you cannot write heading 1 yourself and so on, because then the word processor will not pick up on it and actually implement it as a table of content. So this is one way to introduce a table of content. And typically what I'd like to do is I'd like to have the first chapter start on page 1. So we go down and we introduce a page number, and the page number is introduced through the heading and footer, which can be entered by double clicking either on the top of the page or at the bottom of the page. So we double click and we will get into the header and footer tools, and now we are in the design. We only have one option, so these are the tools that we have available, and then we can close it from this button when we are finished. So what we can do now is that we want to introduce a page number. Typically you can choose, here are many different options, but one that is quite simple to have is this one. So we introduce it, and now you can also see that we have an empty paragraph here, so that we can remove. So now we are at page 3, which is something that we do not want, and the document doesn't understand now, because it really thinks that this is page 1 first and then this is page 2. So what we need to do now is to break the document into different sections, and this is something that we can do with another kind of page break. So we go back to where we want to have a section break. We go back to the layout tab and we have a look at the breaks. So previously we used the ordinary page break function, but we also have the section breaks. Now, since we already have a page break here, we could just implement a continuous section break and have them both. But instead, it would make more sense to introduce the next page break and then remove the one that we have. So we do that. So we introduce a section page break, which you can now see since we have the paragraph marks turned on. And then the old one just jumped down and we can just remove it like so. So now we can go back into the header and footer by double clicking. And now we have more information. Now it says that this is section 1 and it says that this is section 2. However, they are still linked to each other, so section 2 is the same as section 1. And we can address this by coming down here, and now in the design tool we can see here that this is marked the link to previous. So by clicking this we will break the link, and by doing so it will no longer be dark gray, and also the link here will show us it will disappear. So what we can do now is that we can mark our number here, which you see is also a dark gray because it's automatic formatting. We go back here to page number. We can format our page number and we can just ask it to start at 1. Now, since we have also broken our document into 2 sections, we can simply just remove the page numbering here, and it will automatically disappear from the first page as well, because they are part of the same section. So now we have a document that starts at page 1, and if we go up here, now we can mark everything in our document by pressing Ctrl A, and F9 is a short command to have update things in the document, and we can update the entire table. Okay, and now we have everything on page 1, because of course this is a short document. So that was a very brief introduction on the styles and the paragraph mark, the page breaks, different kind of page breaks, the table of content, and also the page numbering. So this will be a good time to break in this section, and we will be back in another section